Thank you for joining me today. My name is Olivia Odero, and I am a licensed professional counselor, as well as a co-founder of Ayen Cafe. So today we'll be talking about part 2 of Thriving in the Dark. And we will be taking a peek into Joseph's life, his childhood per se, to see if it played a role in building his mindset. This is that thriving mindset. So just to do a recap, in part 1, if you were able to watch part 1, I talked about Joseph and his predicament. He was in a situation where he's a slave, had been sold by his siblings, and in a foreign land. So he was in a very dark environment, an environment that did not call for any thriving or being able to do anything worthwhile, because it was just a sad environment. But he thrived. And you can find his story in Genesis, from Genesis 37 to Genesis 50. It's amazing that this man, young boy, he was sold as a slave at age 17, thrives in a foreign land without anything that is familiar, anything that is normal, as we would put it, normal, but yet he finds a way to thrive. So the other thing that, is good just to know, what does thriving mean? So one of the things, he didn't give up to the situations around him, did not give in to, feelings of, when will I see my parents? Will I ever see, my family? Or why did my brothers do this to me? So he didn't give in to any of those emotions. And if you want more, just to know more about that stuff, you can watch that first video that I did last week. So today we are going to look at his childhood, because we're trying to figure out, where did he get this kind of a mindset that thrives despite the circumstances that it is placed in? Because if we can be able to figure out how he was able to develop this mindset, then we've cracked the code. That means that wherever humanity is placed, I'm not saying Joseph represents humanity, but he's just an interesting case to study. That, if we can figure out, like, there's a way to crack the code of thriving no matter the environment you're put in, then we've got gold. That means we can make it no matter where we are. So why do I want to look into childhood? Well, in my field as a professional counselor, we often investigate people's childhood, and investigate not in a bad way, but in a good way. We investigate, like, we kind of ask questions like, what were significant events? What were the family dynamics? What is the family structure? Because we want to kind of figure out, how did this person get to where he is? What is influencing how he makes decisions? What is influencing his perspective? What is influencing how he relates with people? So in Joseph's case, we are seeing this picture of a man of, let's just call him a young boy, because he's between the ages of 17 right now, and his life that we are looking at is between the ages of 17 and 34, so or 32, wherever he was, but in his 30s. So we're trying to figure out, like, how was he able to develop such kind of a mindset in the midst of these dark circumstances? Can his childhood give us a little bit of a tale, or give us a little bit of, some clues to see how he was able to develop this mindset? So that's why we are looking into his childhood, because it will help us understand what molded his mindset. That's if there was anything in his childhood. So it's an investigation, remember. All right, so we'll start with the family structure. So Joseph's dad was married to 2 sisters, and these 2 sisters both had concubines. So they all ended up becoming, like, Joseph's dad's wife, quote unquote, because they all bore children for Joseph's dad. So, quote unquote, Joseph had 4 mothers. So his mom, and then 3 stepmoms. So that's just the family structure we're starting with right there. And then from these 4 mothers, Joseph had 10 stepbrothers and 1 sister. So this is, by the time Joseph is being born into the family, he already has 11 siblings. So he was the 12th sibling. And then later on, he had a younger brother who now they all became like 13 siblings right there. That's like enough to, get a football club going or something. So, so anyway, that's the family structure. Now going into family dynamics. So Joseph's mom had been barren for so many years. And by the time she conceived, her sister and all this other two concubines already had children. So, and when you read the story, there was a lot of tension. Like, it's like, oh, today you can have my husband. No, tomorrow you can have my husband. So he's coming into a situation, a family dynamic that is very interesting. Like, sisters are fighting for dad's attention. Sisters, I mean, wives are fighting for dad's attention. And Joseph's mom was a favorite of the father. So this even caused more tension between Joseph's mom and her own sister, Leah. So right there, you're starting to see the family dynamics. There was just a lot of weird stuff going on. I mean, you're married to two sisters, and then you guys are like sharing, like, okay, when is he sleeping with you, and and then there's a lot of tension, like, oh, I can have more kids than you, and then unfortunately Joseph's mom was barren. So this ended up causing a lot of tension just between those, the wives and even the dad. So there's a lot of marital stuff going on. And then we also talked about Joseph's mom was a favorite of the dad. And somehow the dad didn't hide it when Jacob, that's the dad, didn't hide it when he had a favorite. So like, it was very evident, and this caused a lot of tension between the two sisters. And then when we go on to looking at the dynamics, Joseph was born when they were living with their grandfather. And their grandfather did not like not necessarily not like Joseph's dad, but they had some history, some manipulation history going on. So there was just some tension between the two of them, granddad and Joseph's dad. Granddad's name is Laban, and Joseph's dad is Jacob. So between Laban and Jacob, there was a lot of tension going on. So when Joseph was born, that's the time that Joseph's dad says that, guys, we need to move out of, this place. So he's planning on moving out of the in-laws place. But then granddad says, stay for a while or whatever. So there's just that whole tension of like, man, we need to move, like a lot of things holding people back. And then the other thing is that when Joseph was born, his dad was very old. So he became his dad's favorite. And as I told you before, his dad somehow did not know how to hide when he had a favorite. So Joseph was dressed for the part. Like, his dad went all out and even got him a coat of many colors. They call it a coat of many colors, but he just he made him special, and it's like he made sure that everyone knew that this is my favorite son. And this caused a lot of friction between Joseph and his siblings, as we will see later on in the story. And then so all this is to say, this is the family dynamics going on. All this is to say, Joseph was growing up in a family which had a lot of marital issues going on, a lot of sibling issues going on, a lot of extended family issues going on. Like, it was the quote unquote, messed up family. I mean, not to put it in a bad way, but there's no better way to put it. So let's look at some significant childhood events that happened in Joseph's life. So immediately after his birth, as I said, his dad decided he wanted to move. So they didn't move for a while, but then later on they were able to move. And it just happened that his dad was so sneaky, because dad decides to move when his grandfather was out of town. So he's like, guys, pack your stuff. We need to go before Laban comes back. So they move and they leave, and then grandfather starts running after them. He's like, where the heck did these people go? And so that all that is going on at Joseph's tender years. Like, they're running away from their grandfather, who's now pursuing them, kind of like with an army, because like, did he steal my stuff? Like, it's a very interesting, dramatic story. And then, to make matters worse, Joseph's dad, Jacob, had unfinished business with his own brother Isaac. Sorry, not Isaac, Esau. So he's running away from Laban and going back to his own home, but he has unfinished issues. So he's scared that his own brother is gonna kill him, not just him, but his entire family. So just imagine the tension going on as these people are like this, all this stuff is going on. Like this people have marital issues, these people have sibling rivalry issues, and now to add on top of that, like you're moving, but even the place you're going to, you're not sure if you make it because you're like, man, I've heard that my brother has this big army and he might, because of what I did to him. This is now Joseph's dad's mind. Because of what I did to him, he might kill my entire family. So that's what's going on. These are some of the events that happened in Joseph's life. And then towards where they were going, unfortunately, Joseph's mom passes away while giving birth to his younger brother. So this is an unfortunate event that happens in his childhood. And then the other thing that also happens in the time when they're moving, because in those days, they didn't have, trains like we do or cars. So it took months, sometimes years, to move from one place to another. And then being that Joseph's family was so big, like they had a football club, remember? So being that his family was so big, you couldn't rush people, especially if they were young and there were children in the picture. So all this is going on. And then his sister, remember he had one sister called, I think Dinah. He had a sister and his sister gets raped. So his sister gets raped by a certain man. And why this was a significant event, I mean, one, the sister got raped, so that is trauma added into the family dynamic. But secondly, like the brothers of the sisters got so mad that they went and circumcised men in an entire city. So now, like, the dad is afraid, like, man, you guys, you've just like done the worst thing. Now these people are going to be running after us. So remember, I mean, of course, he had been running from his father-in-law, and now he's afraid like this whole city will come against them because of what his sons have done. So this is another significant event that happened in his childhood. So these are the things that happened before they finally settled down. So when they finally settled down and life is becoming a little bit normal, we start seeing the dynamics play out in Joseph's life. This is where we start seeing how he's dismissed as a person. So Joseph was a dreamer, quote unquote, a dreamer. So he would dream, not dreams where, I have a dream that someday, no, but he would actually go to sleep and dream. And in his dreams, he would see things, in symbols. So he would come, he's young, he's coming and he's telling his brothers and his dad, he's like, guys, this is what I dreamt at night. You know how kids sometimes come and say, man, I had a dream of a unicorn of this. So he comes and he's like, I had this dream. And of course, there's all that tension going on. His brothers are like, what do you think that dream means? Like, like they already have this hatred in their heart towards him. And so they dismissed even the gifting that he had. They dismissed his dreams. They dismissed everything he brought to the table. So these are some things that we start seeing, like just how they interact in the family. Another thing we see is that his dad depended on him to find out what was happening with his brothers. I mean, this is kind of a little bit interesting. Those kids who the dad is like, or the parent is like, I know they'll tell me the truth, So unfortunately, this was put upon Joseph. So we see Joseph would come and quote unquote snitch on his brothers. I mean, they were not really good guys because they would do evil stuff, as the Bible shows. And Joseph would be the one who'd bring that news. And the time where he actually now got sold as a slave, his dad had sent him, go check on your brothers. And when the brothers saw him, that's how this whole thing now comes into play. He was sold as a slave at the age of 17. And when I was doing the math, he was sold for $5. $5. Like the money that, when you translate it to what we use today, he was sold for $5. That's how much his brothers valued his life. I mean, they were going to kill him, but then they decided, let's just sell him. Like, what use would it be if we kill him? But that's how much they did not value him. So this is what Joseph grew up in. This was Joseph's life. This was Joseph's childhood before he was sold into slavery. So we see a lot of trauma, we see a lot of abuse, we see a lot of codependency going on, and we just see a lot of, aggression, all these things happening. So Joseph's childhood, quote unquote, was really messed up. Like, there's no pretty way of putting it. There's no beautiful box of packing it. His childhood was bad. And if he were alive today, statistics would kind of give a projection of how his life would look like in the future. I mean, as a counselor, if a client comes to me and this is what I am seeing, this is the assessment I am making, I would kind of have, there's a way we would project as much as, I'm like, okay, there's hope for everyone, but I would kind of give a projection, like these are some things you might want to look out for because of all these things that have happened in this child's life. One of the things is that he would be someone who would probably struggle with connecting with people because he couldn't connect with his brothers. His brothers hated him. So you'd have some esteem issues. Is something wrong with me? Like he would question himself, like, do I have any value? Can I bring anything worth on the table? Like he would be so insecure, quote unquote. He would also be probably someone who would become a people pleaser, just trying to fit in. Like, if I do this, will my brothers like me? If I do that, will they, will I fit in with them? So projections, like those are some of the projections that, I would give as a counselor with the assessment of his childhood. The other thing is that he might become someone who'd become so entitled and narcissistic because of how his dad treated him, where he would always kind of expect to be favored by people. And then the other thing, if he got married, with the statistics of what his life is showing, it would even be questionable if he got married. How do I get married when this is all I've known about marriage? Statistics would show that he would probably question being married, or if he ever got married, he would have a lot of marital issues because it wasn't a good picture, wasn't painted for him of what marriage should be like. And then he would probably be someone who'd self-medicate just to feel better because he has a lot of wounds. So he'd probably be addicted to stuff, but probably take drugs, like just a lot of stuff. So these are the statistics. This is what statistics shows. This is what statistics would project Joseph's life. And if he were to become a Christian, I mean, we know that Joseph grew up in a family. By then, they weren't Christians necessarily. By then, they were just believers in God, but they were not Christians. But let's say he was in this season, in the life, after Christ, where we're living in this season. If he were to be a Christian, I would assume he would doubt the existence of God because he would question, like, God, if there is a God, where was he when all these things were happening to me? And even let's say he's now in slavery and he's like, someone is telling him like, God loves you and stuff. He'd be like, but why am I a slave if there is a God? So these are some of the projections that statistics shows would happen to someone who's had a childhood like Joseph did. But he didn't. He doesn't fit the criteria for what statistics shows. He did not become a statistic, which is even intensifying our investigation more. We're like, okay, so nothing in his childhood gives us any clue concerning the kind of man we are studying today. He is the person who beats the odds, quote unquote, because he ended up showing that he could have good relationships. Like he ended up getting married, and he was respected by not only his fellow prisoners, but also people who are above him, his masters. They respected him enough to put him in charge of other prisoners. So that means, this person not only worked hard, but, because, you can bring so much to the table, but if your character stinks, like if you don't have good interpersonal skills, if you're awkward, I mean, not that being awkward is wrong or anything, but there are just some things that the society looks for, and if society finds people lacking in some things, like they just won't put you in certain positions. But we see that Joseph was elevated to certain positions that mean he knew how to interact with people. He knew how to relate with people. And it's interesting. I mean, where did he learn this from? Because his brothers never wanted to relate with him. Like, where in the world did he pick up these relational skills from? And then he also valued his principles. Like, he wasn't a people pleaser. He wasn't just willing to do anything to fit in with what's going on around him. Like, Pharaoh's wife comes to him and says, you're good looking, like, kind of go with the flow, like, lay with me, sleep with me. And he was like, I cannot do such a thing. Like, we're like, where did this man get this kind of mindset? Because he should have been someone who is a people pleaser, because he still has so many wounds. That's what statistics show. But Joseph is beating the odds, and he's like way ahead of the game. The other thing that was so interesting is that he continues to dream. Not necessarily dreamer, he continues to interpret dreams and value even other people's dreams enough to interpret them. So this is someone whose own dreams were dismissed, were invalidated, but he still has it somewhere inside of him to hear someone else's dream, because fellow prisoners came to him with dreams and said, this is what I dreamt. And Joseph is able to say, like, oh, I know who can interpret your dream. So, like, there was something that must have happened to Joseph. There was something that, like, it doesn't add up, because this man was beating the odds. This man was just showing, like, he was excelling in every area that he should have failed in. And then the other thing is that he was an excellent worker, and he became an effective and sought out leader. This is someone who, his brothers had looked down upon him. No one saw him as a leader. No one saw him with any value. But he had his esteem. He had his self-worth still intact. So whichever way he did it, I don't know, but that is what we're investigating. The other amazing thing is that, like we talked about, like, if Joseph were to be a Christian, he would have doubted God's existence because of all the circumstances that happened in his life and even the situation he was in the present. But what we see of Joseph is mind-blowing, because later on he actually meets his siblings, and what comes out of his mouth is very interesting. He tells them that what you guys meant for evil, God used it for good. Not only for me, but for all of us. So meaning that he still respected God. He still believed in God. He still had his faith in hope in God, despite how the circumstances were going on around him. And it wasn't just any kind of faith, but it was a healthy kind of faith, which is like, I know his power. I know him. It's not like he put me in this. But, I won't go ahead of myself. We're going to discuss that in another video. But this is who Joseph had become. So just in summary, Joseph's childhood is not giving us the answers we need. Joseph's childhood is not showing us where his mindset came from. Rather, it is intensifying this investigation. Like, how can such a person who's not only in a dark situation, but with such a dark childhood, become the kind of man that he became? How did this happen? Before we end the video, there are two questions I want to ask just in relation to what we've learned. Could it be that he repressed memories? Because we've heard of people who repress things and just never think about it. It's like, oh, it never happened. Like they just have like this amnesia, like it just didn't happen. So could it be that he repressed his memories because he just needed to focus on what he was focusing on and move on with life? Or could it be that he was an outlier, one of those people who just excel, he just made it in life? Well, to answer those two questions, one, later in life, we don't see that he was one who repressed his memories, because when he meets his siblings, he actually cries, like he's overwhelmed with emotions, but they don't overtake him. The emotions don't overtake him, meaning that he didn't repress them. Another thing that shows us he did not repress them is that, people who repress feelings, like this is now, we're going into the counseling field, people who repress feelings, it always comes out somehow. They either project it to, a dog, well, people who kick dogs because they're angry at their boss. Like if you're repressing something, somehow, some way, it will spill out. And the Bible, unfortunately, does not hide people's flaws. The Bible is very, very open about telling how people messed up. But in Joseph's case, we don't see that. Like he was given opportunities to mess up, but we don't see that. He was given opportunities to, project all these emotions he was feeling, but we don't see that. Meaning he did not repress his emotions. I mean, that's what I see. And then the other thing, he wasn't an outlier, because we see that things did not seem to come easy for him. He had to work hard. He had to show himself excellent. And because these people who are promoting him were seeing something, they were not just seeing, talent, but they were seeing, man, this person has substance. This person is bringing something valuable to the table. So anyway, all that is to say, then, how is it that Joseph could have such a thriving mindset? How is it possible? How is it possible? Because if we can figure this out, like I said at the beginning of this video, if we can figure this out, then we have cracked the code of showing us that despite the circumstances we are in that are dark, like COVID-19 right now, or a dark childhood, despite those things, we can still thrive. We can still make it. We can still come out shining as gold. So what that is to say is that the investigation is still on, and I'm hoping you can join me next week to see different aspects of Joseph's life that might be able to answer the question for us. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.